Welcome to Job Tales, the show where we find out about different professions from the people who know. Today is a bit of a special edition as I am the guest. In the next 35 minutes, you will learn about my own professional story and also why I decided to start Job Tales. Now, who's interviewing me? Well, you may remember him from one of my earliest episodes. Dr. Troy Hiduke Campbell is a behavioral scientist, innovation consultant, and marketing professor. In his classes, he shares Job Tales episodes with students to help them see the opportunities, the paths, and details of the many jobs out there. So, here you go.
Hello, my name is Troy Hiduke Campbell, and welcome to a flipped episode of Job Tales.
And this is Laura on the other side of the Job Tale spectrum. Thank you, Troy.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be doing this episode. As you know so well, I love what you do here as a university professor. I often say that students spend years preparing for a career, but have absolutely no idea what careers look like. And the specific way that you show careers with Job Tales provides that details, that path, that nonlinearity that is just so useful for students and everyone to understand. So thanks for making this podcast, and I'm very glad to flip the script on you today.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I'm so glad because it is really for students such as your students that I do this. You know, the younger crowd, the younger generation, and so it's going to be very interesting what we're going to talk about today.
All right. Well, I have the great privilege to say, Laura Leoncini, in your own words, can you explain what you do in your job?
Yes, I can. So today, actually, my job is business development. Let's say senior business development in electric aviation, and what that means is basically in sales. So I open the doors, I do networking, and I basically sell the infrastructure, charging infrastructure for electric aircraft, be it all kind of basically flying machines, and it's all about energy transition. And this is what I do today. Yeah, since now 4 5 years almost.
So, learning about and developing the future of aviation.
Yeah, which is very exciting because it is not visible to the public opinion today, you know, and to the public in general. It's something that's going to become more and more visible maybe about 5 to 10 years from now. So that's what is exciting for me.
Following some of your posts and seeing just how exciting and, as you explain, unknown a lot of these things are to the general public is that's a fascinating space to be in.
Yeah, for real. And it's not something that I have done before because actually sales is only new to me because I come from a marketing and communication background, and so what I did before was mainly, you know, communications, marketing, PR, and then event management, and then film production and TV series production. That's my background mainly, but sales per se, it was kind of the first time that I did that, and it was only 5 years ago, and I'm almost 50, so it's yeah, it was something completely different and exciting.
So on this podcast, you talk a lot about your people's passions for their career. What is the thing that makes you passionate about what you do?
Honestly, Troy, it's interacting with the others. It's listening to their stories. I mean, I just love to meet new people and negotiating and trying to find the entry point into making an argument, a sales argument, you know, and a sales pitch by understanding the other, you know, who I am in front of me. The whole psychology behind it is so interesting. And yeah, that's what makes me passionate about this job. And then, of course, the cherry on the cake is the aviation side, aerospace, and I'm learning to fly, so it's particularly of interest to me.
Doing a little yes and on that sales. I think a lot of people don't understand in general what sales are and how much it is often problem solving, a human thing, and also in your case, very much a development thing. Can you explain what sales means in your context?
Sales is really like, I would say, an opening to a future of opportunities. Because when I want to sell, let's say, the charging infrastructure for electric aircraft, I'm not selling just the actual infrastructure, I'm selling the concept, I'm selling the future to a person. The person could be an airport, it could be a club owner, it could be a pilot, etc. Right, so you need to visualize what you visualize, and you need to bring the what is it that they will do with your product or service that they don't do today, and why they should do it. And so it can be challenging, because when you need to, it's like when I started 5 years ago, I was in cars, so basically charging stations for electric cars, and it was exactly the same thing. It was still very early, and I needed to sell the concept that yes, electric mobility will be the future. It's actually about to become the present, but nobody wanted to hear it, right? So it's that helping your buyer or your customer buy into that concept, which is the most challenging and but also most exciting. So you need to come up with all sorts of value propositions and advantages, and why you should do that, and what's going to bring to you. And it's really about them, and it's not about you. It's not that I want to sell to them, but it's why they should buy that from me, and how their life is going to be improved.
When I'm doing development and training with different companies, often my absolute favorite are people like you, to work with people who are in sales, especially in your science and innovation spaces, because it's just everything at the same time. It's storytelling, it's problem solving, it's innovation, it's creativity, it's interacting with people. And it's so much fun. And salespeople tend to just realize upfront, oh yeah, everything you are going to tell me about story is important to what I need to do, because I'm telling the story of the future of a thing. Everything you're talking about creativity and improvisation is important because I'm going to be having calls and I'm interacting with them. It's just like a space of everything coming together. In some of my intro to marketing classes, I'll bring somebody in from sales, and all the students will be like, wait, that's what sales is? That sounds really cool. Maybe I don't want to go into Instagram marketing. Maybe I want to do this thing that does more.
Yes.
That's great.
And you know what, Troy? I mean, it's so true that what you're saying. And honestly, I would have never thought I would like sales. I actually hated selling. I mean, I hate to sell, but I didn't know what it entails. I didn't know that there was going to be all this negotiation part, all this, kind of flirting, with your customers. And it's like a dance where, I give something, they give something back. And then eventually maybe a year from now, we'll close the deal. But it's been like a building the relationship along the way, and all that part is really nice, and for me enriching. But I didn't know until I actually did it. The reason why I did it is because I had enough of marketing and I didn't want to do marketing anymore. So it kind of took me maybe 20 plus years, in my career, to open my mind to sales.
All right. Well, that seems like a perfect time to go back in time a little bit and start this job tale, which, hey, you've already said things about film production and events. We know it's going to be a very non-linear story, as you
Yeah.
often find people on this podcast telling. I want a supercut of all the times Laura says, so it was kind of non-linear. So it was a twisty path. So it wasn't a direct path. It's great. Let's see, where do we want to start? Let's take my bias as a professor and go back in time and say, what did you study in university?
I studied communication sciences. It was the second year ever that this new discipline had started in Rome, where I grew up. And out of exclusion, I chose communication sciences. So I knew I didn't want to do law because I have a bad memory. That was my reasoning. I didn't want to do science because I didn't find myself feel that I was really very scientific. And then medicine, I didn't want to spend 10 years studying. And so communication came to save me. And I said, oh, I love to communicate, I love to talk. Let's do that. So I did 5 years of communication studies in my early 20s. Yeah. After that, I did, it's not a postgrad, but it's like basically it's a master's degree, a grad courses of 2 years in international cooperation and development. Because I had moved to Geneva for the first time in Switzerland. I had fallen in love with human rights and saving the world. I was still in my 20s, and I thought, The world is my oyster. And let's do that. So I did development studies and cooperation.
And when you're young, you're like, I don't want to commit to one of these things, or these don't feel like me. And here's an area where I get to talk a lot and also get a practical skill, and also can get out of it to some degree, enough that I can then go start living up the world where making the world your oyster. Now you're getting involved in sort of some more development, side of things. And how is that going to continue in your career? Is it going to be a straight path to your current job, or are we going to see some more twists?
Yes, I would say twists. I was gonna say bumps, but actually bumps makes a judgment about about the path. I think it's like you said, non-linear is probably the best way to say it, and it's yeah, it's been like this since I started my career, basically doing kind of like a trial and error and trying one path and then going to another. So I did a few years in international development cooperation. I found a foundation in Switzerland that was working with the United Nations, and it was about sports. So bringing sport as an element for to foster development and cooperation, like in third world countries. And I always loved sports, so for me, it was like the match made in heaven. And it didn't last too long because the funds started to deplete quite fast. And then with my partner at the time, we decided that we wanted to leave Switzerland and travel around the world. And we had got the bug of the movies. So together we
Mhm.
fueled our passion by writing a couple of screenplays. We produced a movie in Switzerland. And then with that movie, we traveled around the world. We literally left Switzerland on a smart car, and uh, and then we started traveling around the world through film festivals, and that was the beginning of our worldwide journey that lasted about 12 years, doing a bunch of different things. Yeah, I don't know. I can say
Can you
much
answer
more.
these two questions simultaneously? Which is one, I know your media and film career is illustrious, and if you could give us some examples more of that, so the listeners can understand. And then also the question that I think anybody listening right now is thinking is, how did you have enough guts and how did you have enough confidence to make something that, at least on the surface, seems like a total left turn into something different? Like, we talked about saving the world, and now we're gonna get working on like Emmy type shows.
Yes, that is true. So the guts was, I don't know if you ask my parents, it's more like I was so not it was actually a hunger and confidence. We said, you know what, let's just do this, and we kind of had enough of the Swiss life and being disappointed that there was no, there were no more funds in the NGOs that we were working for, the non-governmental organization and so forth. And then we said, okay, you know what, we can do it. And so it was really not. I don't think it was courage. It was just that you think you're invincible at that time, and honestly, I'm happy that we did it because it brought, there were ups and downs, and it wasn't always roses and flowers like we say in Italian, but it was getting out of your comfort zone big times, and so that, for that I'm grateful. And even for the parts where we suffered in a way that, mentally suffering, and not knowing where we were going and not having the ground on your under your feet, oftentimes it's not a pleasant sensation all along, all the time. But so that was it. So the courage was kind of more like not thinking about it. And then the other thing, what was your other question?
Yeah, and I was just like, maybe you could mention like maybe a movie or television show that you worked on.
I worked on a couple of like indie movies that you may not know of, which was good to get the experience. And then when I moved to South Africa, I worked on Black Sails, which is a TV series that had four
Hmm.
seasons. So I worked on season 2 and season 3. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's
Oh
from
yes,
Stars
yes.
Entertainment. You did? Okay, cool.
I got a lot of nerdy friends, and I am a nerd myself, so this show comes up a lot.
Okay. And so that was cool. And then I did a movie called Honey 3 as a production manager. So the line producer that I was working for on Black Sails, he said, "Hey, why don't you come on my next movie?" And then I said, okay. And by then I knew about 20% of what a production manager does. And so he said, yeah, come over. And so he said, I'll help and so forth. So he basically put me on that job, and I literally knew nothing. I was so stressed. And I managed to do it 5 months. It was one of the most stressful times of my life. And that's when I said, okay, I think I have burned too many steps at too quickly. Usually when to become a production manager, you start by bringing coffee to the producer or the director. Then you become an assistant. Then you become, you start in the production office and as a secretary, coordinator, and blah, blah, blah. And then you become a production manager, which is a very important role. But I did that within 2 years. So for me, it was very, very fast, and maybe too fast. And so I said, after Honey 3, I decided to stop with that. I said, oh, let's go back to Switzerland to have a more tranquil life and easier life. And this is, yeah, that's what I did. I went back to Switzerland, and I got an event manager job for a corporate. That's how I got back.
Yeah, so it's around 2016, and you're coming back to Switzerland after this whirlwind of a journey of a life.
Yeah.
And so you make more of a turn into this events and then more into the corporate space that you're doing now. And you talked about one of the reasons was quality of life. And what were the other reasons that brought you to where you are today?
The main reason was that I wanted to feel secure again, probably because of, how I was brought up. My parents always said, you have a fixed job and you have to build for the future and so forth. And I think that despite the adventure I had, what I was that was missing was this more secure thread in my life. And so this is what brought me. And then of course, because my family is was back in Italy, and I wanted to be closer, all these things. So I became kind of wiser. I don't know if you can say wiser. And initially, honestly, I
Uh-huh.
was really not feeling well. I thought I had failed. I thought, oh my god, I'm coming back to Switzerland. I have done so much, I've grown so much, and then here is I can come back to a country where nothing has changed. So I had changed, but nothing else had changed. So I was really having a big crisis, and back in Italy as well. Coming back to see my family and to see friends, I felt I was out of place in both countries, and I really hit a pretty hard bottom. And my relationship ended, unfortunately, because of all of this turmoil. And yeah, it was really tough. So going back to Switzerland for me was coming back to a safe haven, even if initially I hated it. And but I did it because I actually hated who I had become at that time. So I needed that step to rise again. And yes, it actually paid off. And but during that time, I said, there must be ways for people to go through life in an easier way than I've done. Like, if there was something, if we, the professionals of today could convey messages to the younger crowd, the younger people, to tell them and even to warn them of a few things, out of our experience, learn from also our experience, and then see if for yourself if this is a path you would like or not. I would have probably had a different life, and not regretting any bit of my life, because I think it's that the ups and the downs make your life beautiful. But I think I could have maybe gone to where I want to be a bit sooner, earlier. Maybe I would have saved my relationship. Who knows? But
Yeah.
and yeah, so you see a lot of kids today that are a bit lost because there's so many choices. And
Hmm.
when you have choices, it becomes overwhelming, and then it kind of petrifies you. Then you're blocked. So, well, and there's so many jobs out there. We don't even know how many there are. We just follow what we know in our circle of our family, of our friends, of our community, a neighborhood. But that's it, and you don't know what somebody's doing on the other corner of the world. Voila.
Yeah.
So this is in a nutshell.
Yeah. It's so interesting how some people, some students, they just are so unaware of all the options that are out there. And then once they become aware of many of the options, or if they ever do, they can sometimes be overwhelmed because they see a bunch of options, but there's no detail. It's just like,
Hmm.
I saw this person posting on Instagram and they design events like that, or this person works in aerospace. And like, you just there's no context, there's no wisdom that you have about that. And it's just this
Yeah.
weird way in which we don't understand what a career trajectory could ever look like.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that I was astonished by some of the interviews I've done with people that, let's say, the concept that I had about that job or what I was imagining that job to be was actually completely different. Well, in one case, a psychologist was telling me that her job is actually a solitary job, and I never thought a psychologist could be a solitary job because you meet so many people every day. But then she was telling me that you do meet many people, your patients, let's say customers, but then in between you have maybe 10, 15 minutes until the next one. And then you don't really have the time to relax or exchange with your colleagues, at the cafeteria or so, because you're doing like a chaining of meetings and sessions with your patients. So it is a solitary one. So you need to be prepared that if you want to have a social job, this is not it, most
Yeah.
likely. And there were thousands of examples like this that, in my 100, maybe 120 episodes today. It's incredible how much also recurring topics are coming, and recurring aspects of a job or job searching, or why do people look for a specific job. It's incredible.
Yeah, I've been writing down what I'm going to give to my students this fall semester. And I say, when listening to these podcast episodes, think about how there's going to be so many different options that you weren't aware of. Think about all the different paths, right? And then think of all the details, right? So the
Hmm.
paths, you had that acoustic consultant, and they talked about how, like, there's just so many different types of people that made their way into acoustic consulting.
Yes, exactly. Actually, there wasn't even a, let's say, like the degree of acoustic degree didn't actually even exist when Elizabeth, in this
Yeah.
case, who I interviewed, when she studied. So and so in her team she has people that comes from physics, architecture, mechanical engineering, and the diversity is actually very enriching. So you get to that job by doing it, by, maybe you stumble upon it, you learn into it, you have an apprenticeship maybe at a sound company, or an architecture company that has a very strong focus on acoustic design, and then there you go, there you become an expert. There's no linear path to it, not necessarily, let's say.
When I was in undergraduate, I had no clue where I was going to go, and there wasn't this thing that was famous at that time, like behavioral science, consumer psychology wasn't that famous, and it took
Yeah.
one of my advisors to just pull a book off the shelf and says, "I think everybody here wants to be a social psychologist, but I think you want to be a consumer psychologist." He hands it to me. I immediately find who I am, and within less than 2 years of that moment, I'm a consumer psychologist at Disney Imagineering. And it's just that
Uh-huh.
I just had no clue that that thing existed out there, and all these different paths and options. And then the other thing that you were talking about, right? Those details, right? It's so fascinating how you learn about these jobs, and this job is more solitary than you think. This job is more problem solving than you think. Like sales or HR is actually more fun than than you think, or
Yeah.
academia can be much more writing than you expect it to be. And maybe that's not everybody's job, but in that space. But if you're unaware of how often it actually is like that, or how it could be turned to be something different, people are just unaware. And I think it's really good sometimes for people to hear, especially on your tales of people who have left jobs. They're like, "Oh, I was working at a job that I thought would be cool, like since I was working at like a Nike, or maybe even like a Disney, but the job there wasn't really that great
Yeah.
because I wasn't really doing interesting stuff every day. I was just working on a long-term project, and that project was cool, but I wasn't like Laura, who just gets to talk about new things in aerospace and aviation with all these different people all the time across all these different situations, that's actually a lot more fun.
There's also like an underlying message that I found in my interviewing people is that there's no easy way to a path. I mean, you need to put the effort to it, and you need to put your mind to a goal. And there was this guy Perry Petropoulos, a Greek slash Canadian dive instructor who is he's 73, and he was telling me about all this stuff that he's done, and it made it sound so easy. But as I said, don't you find it, do you find it hard what you did? And I said, no, I put my mind to a goal. If you want to do something, you go for it. You need to visualize it and then focus at it, and not don't let anything else pull you, left or right, or distract from that goal. And he says, yeah, that's it, that's how I did it. I didn't even find, he doesn't regret anything. He never found anything disappointing. He worked hard. He saw the goal, and this is something that I find in many people that I interview. No matter what they choose, it's you put the hard work, and then you get the results. So that's a I found it as a very powerful and important message. On top of the details that you were saying, that's very important because it's you need to scrape through the surface and then go deep into what is the job that you think you're going to do for the rest of your life. And so getting to know as many details as possible is really important. And the path non-linear is okay. It could be linear, and which is great, but if it's not linear, is actually good as well, as long as you get, yeah, you grow and you learn, and then you find some pleasure in it. It's wonderful. There's not a single path, actually.
And I think that I love this idea that, like, you can tell a student that a nonlinear path works, that it's useful, but they have no way to imagine that because their entire life has been the most linear thing possible because they've just been in school to the age of 22.
True.
And only when you hear these job tales does it really sort of allow them or anyone to have the wisdom to be like, "Oh, so when I do that, it allows me to have this skill, and if I'm aware in this situation, I'll see this opportunity." And just seeing what a nonlinear career actually can look like is just something, again, like most every student I've ever taught has never spent 20 times listening to 20 minutes about a career, and that's sad. And I love that this resource now exists for students to access that in a true honest way, not the candy coated fancy bios and very edited stories that get put on websites or the other types of podcasts out there.
Yeah.
Something real. And I love the like realness of the podcast and people rambling at times and expressing emotions and nuances through that as well. It's so great.
Yes, well, thank you. I really hope that I can bring more and more of that. I'm also growing as the podcast grows. I also grow because it's something new for me, and so I always invite people to tell me, how I can do better, and not only like what kinds of jobs I should interview, but also like what kind of questions I should ask, or because it's really through the process that we can collectively learn from this. I also am learning a lot, from the interviews I make, and in really learning to create our own professional reality, and not stop at what often we're molded by, like the educational system expects us to do this and that. And then if you take risks, you should know that there is certain consequences. Maybe you should not take risks, but then it's a scary process. But then what if we did take a risk? Like, what if the risk actually paid off? It's all an enrichment process. And having now been, quite a few years in the job market, I can say I'm still alive. You are still alive, and alive and kicking, and really grateful for those years of learning. But yeah, it's a process, and I hope that I'll be able to bring more experiences into my mic through with other jobs.
And what a beautiful idea that we can all keep growing. And again, like so many of us when we're young, we're told, oh, you're going to be 23 and then you'll have all the education you need and you're going to get that job and you're going to do that. And to some degree, a lot of the people around us have done that because that's to some degree what most teachers are, is they got out of school and they immediately got that job and they just did that thing forever. But most other people's lives are not going to be like that. And also, won't it be a beautiful thing, not such just a negative thing? It will be a beautiful thing to keep growing and keep learning even after having a long job tail already. Thank you so much, Laura Leoncini, for making this and taking the time to speak with me about your job tail.
Thank you, Troy. It's been really nice to talk to you. I'm honored. I'm really honored that you like my podcast. I'm honored that you interviewed me, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. You've listened to another episode of Job Tales. You can follow me on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. If you want to be my next guest, write me at jobtalespodcast, one word, @gmail.com. Just remember, it's TALES. Bye for now.